Fairy tales are the safest stories we own. That's the point, isn't it? Good triumphs over evil. Love conquers all. Children fall asleep to them. Here's the problem. None of that is true. Fairy tales were never safe. They were never for children. And the versions you know, Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, Sleeping Beauty, are the results of centuries of deliberate, systematic editing designed to hide what they actually meant. This is what they cut out, and why. To understand what happened to fairy tales, you need to understand where they came from. And it wasn't a book. Before the Brothers Grimm, before Perrault, before anyone wrote anything down, fairy tales were oral folk stories, told by adults to adults, in fields, in kitchens, in taverns. They were not entertainment for children. They were warnings. Forests were dangerous places. Famine was real. Predators, human and animal, were a genuine threat, and the stories people told reflected that world. They were brutal because life was brutal. Here's what nobody tells you about the Brothers Grimm. Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm published their first collection in 1812. The book was called Kinder and Hausmärchen, literally children and household tales. But it was not written for children. The original 1812 edition contains academic footnotes, scholarly annotations. It was a folklore preservation project, an attempt to capture the oral tradition of the German peasantry before it disappeared. The Grimms believed these stories contained the remnants of ancient Germanic mythology, and they did not censor anything. In the first edition of Cinderella, the stepsisters don't just fail to fit the slipper, they cut off their own toes, and later their heels, trying to force the shoe on. Blood pools in the glass, birds peck out their eyes at the wedding. In the original Little Red Riding Hood, which predates the Grimms by over a century, the wolf serves Little Red her own grandmother's flesh and blood before climbing into bed with her. The story ends with her death. No woodsman, no rescue, just a warning about predators who wear familiar faces. In the earliest surviving Sleeping Beauty variant, a 14th century romance called Percy Forest, the princess is not kissed awake. She is assaulted in her sleep. She gives birth, still unconscious. She only wakes when her infant son sucks the poison splinter from her finger. These are not bedtime stories. So how did we get from cannibalism and sexual violence to Disney musicals? The answer sits in the 19th century, and it's one of the most successful PR campaigns in literary history. When the Grimms published their first edition, it was received with confusion. The academic audience appreciated the scholarship, but the general public, parents who bought a book called Children's and Household Tales, expecting stories for their children, were horrified. Wilhelm Grimm, the younger brother, took charge of the revisions between 1812 and 1857. The collection went through 7 editions, and with each edition Wilhelm edited more aggressively. Mothers became stepmothers, because it was acceptable for a stepmother to be evil, but not a biological mother. Sexual references were removed entirely. Violence was toned down, though never eliminated. Wilhelm believed some violence was morally instructive. And then the Victorians got hold of them. Victorian England was the most effective censorship machine fairy tales ever encountered. The same culture that covered piano legs because they resembled, well, legs, was not going to tolerate stories about cannibalism and incest. Fairy tales were reclassified as children's literature. The violence was further softened, the sexual content was erased, and a new framing took hold. Fairy tales as moral instruction. Good behaviour rewarded, bad behaviour punished. the world made safe for the nursery. But the Victorians didn't just censor. They misunderstood. They read fairy tales as simple morality plays. Be good, be obedient, don't stray from the path. They missed the deeper structure entirely. Because here's what the original stories actually did that the cleaned up versions can't. Fairy tales, the real ones, were not about morality. They were about survival. The forest in every Grimm tale is not a metaphor. For a German peasant in the 1600s, the forest was genuinely dangerous. You could get lost. You could starve. You could be attacked. The wolf is not a symbol of male sexuality. At least, not only that. Predators were real. Famine was real. The stories encoded real threats. The stepmother who wanted you dead in an era when women routinely died in childbirth, stepmothers were common, and they often favoured their own biological children over their stepchildren. That wasn't a fairy tale. That was someone's life. Every element of these stories had a practical origin, a genuine fear, a genuine danger that the oral tradition preserved and the Victorians erased. And then came Disney. Walt Disney's Snow White in 1937 did something no one had done before. It took a Grimm fairy tale already heavily sanitised and transformed it into mass-market entertainment for children. The dwarfs became comic relief. The Queen's punishment, dancing to death in red-hot iron shoes, was removed entirely. The story became safe. Cinderella in 1950 repeated the formula. Singing mice, fairy godmothers, bibbidi-bibbidi-boo. The stepsisters' mutilated feet, the eye-pecking birds, gone. All of it. Gone. So here's the uncomfortable question this leaves us with. What did we lose when we made these stories safe? It's not just that we lost the violence, though we did. It's that we lost the function. The original fairy tales prepared people for a world that was unpredictable, dangerous, and frequently unfair. They warned about predators who smiled, about stepmothers who resented you, about strangers offering gifts, about the darkness in the forest and in other people. They taught resilience, not naive optimism, but the grim, practical knowledge that bad things happen and sometimes you survive anyway. The Victorians replaced that with moral instruction. Disney replaced it with escapism. And we are not better off for the trade. The next time someone tells you a fairy tale, ask yourself, what was the cut to make it safe? What was removed to make it appropriate? What warning, what truth, what piece of genuine human experience was deemed too dangerous to tell? Because the original stories are still there, hidden in the oldest editions, preserved in the academic record, waiting for someone to read them as they were, not as we wish they had been. And once you've read them, you'll never hear Once Upon a Time the same way again. Thank you for watching. Next Sunday, I'm investigating nursery rhymes, and what I found is arguably worse than fairy tales. You think Ring Around the Roses is about the plague? It's more disturbing than that. Subscribe so you don't miss it.